Oh my gosh, am I burnt out?
Well, that's actually the biggest sign that you need to stop.
The norm is to be like, oh, I'm so stressed, like I've just got so much on. And it's this approval thing. I guess it's part of feeling in this community of stress.
When I burnt out, that was not because of the job. When you adopt stress as your identity, breaking out of that is obviously quite hard.
Do you think lawyers are or can be addicted to stress?
I thought I had to be stressed in order to perform well. I thought stress was the thing that gave me the results that I got.
A lot of people blame the industry for it being a notoriously stressful industry. Stress in law isn't just part of the job, it's built into the culture. Deadlines, client demands, billable hours. It's easy to believe that stress is something external, something that happens to you. But stress isn't just about the job, it's a biological response. This episode is part of a new mini-series on well-being in law. While the demands of the industry aren't changing overnight, lawyers have to rethink how they can navigate them. And no, this isn't just another meditate and take breaks kind of conversation. We know stress in law isn't that simple. The reality is most advice doesn't cut it, especially when you're dealing with constant pressure, high stakes, and a workload that just never stops. But there are ways to take back control, ways that actually work in the legal world. If you've ever thought, I need to know how to manage stress but nothing seems to help, then this is for you. Today, I'm sitting down with Grace Williams to get expert advice on how to manage stress in law. She's an ex-White and Case solicitor turned health and nutrition coach. So, Grace, in our very first conversation that we had, I was listening back to the episode and I heard you mention one symptom of burnout could be that you feel like you need to be either watching stuff or listening to stuff, or you need to be distracted somehow, even when you're walking or whatever. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I burnt out? Because I just, whether I'm brushing my teeth, going for a walk, or I've got a moment of silence, I put on a podcast or music. I'd just like to understand from you how important, but it might not be important at all, but I don't know, is it to have silence in terms of for your brain, for your body, if you feel burnt out, or to try and prevent burnout?
So I think actually there's a very key distinction. So that symptom is very much in that second stage of the stress response, which is your resistance stage, which is the stage before burnout. So why that symptom is so important is ultimately it is showing you that you are stuck in that high alert, stressed setting. And that will only continue until the point at which the resources run out, which they're going to run out because we can't sustain that level of stress and impact on our body for a long period of time. I always like to say we are like athletes in law. The performance that you are expected to, or the level that you're expected to perform at, is no different to that of an athlete. And the thing that athletes all have is a recovery plan. So they have the really intense periods, but they always have their recovery afterwards. And that's the thing that we're missing when it comes to preventing burnout. In terms of the silence piece, it is so important because ultimately, if you think of it as when you are stressed and you're in that fight or flight response, your brain is wired to be looking out for threats. And the reason why I'm pointing behind me is because you're wired to kind of look at the tiger behind you and go, oh my gosh, I need to run. So that is what your brain is doing. The amygdala has taken over and it is fully scanning for any threat that's in front of you. So it is on high alert. It is so wired up and so ready to find something wrong, which is why we quite often catastrophize. What it means is that that speed and efficiency and constant stimulation is something your brain is craving because it's just looking for things. It's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And the way to counter that is to take away the stimulation, because what that then is doing is telling your brain, I'm safe. The problem with silence is we don't ever really have it. So feeling safe can feel very sort of alien to us, and having that silence can feel slightly more stressful than actually it should be. So Silence is the goal, the big aim we want to get to. But I will never say for someone to go straight from, I listen to something all the time, I always have the TV on, or if I've got the TV on, I'm also scrolling, or as you said, I'm brushing my teeth and listening to a podcast. The sort of other element that comes in there is also the productivity side. When we are on that high alert stress setting, we want to be as productive and efficient as possible, which means you want to fit everything into your day. So listening to the podcast while you're brushing your teeth is you ticking two things off at once. Great, double win. But actually, your brain then hasn't ever switched off. And what's then happening is we're staying on that treadmill, we're staying on that high alert, we're not going into that recovery plan. So the silence piece is great, but as I said, we don't want to go from 100 to 0, because that then can go from like a stressful situation in terms of the stimulation to our body almost being like, what is happening here? And finding that a stressful situation too. So it's finding your entry point and sort of going backwards. So actually working towards the silence. So if it's that you always listen to a podcast when you're on a walk, that is, you're learning, you're sort of engaging with it, can you switch to instrumental music? So you still have some noise, you still have some sound, but it's not as stimulating. Same with if you're watching TV and you then also are on your emails or on your laptop, you're scrolling on your phone, can you just do one of those? So think about reducing as opposed to, right, I'm now never going to listen to anything again. Find the ways to bring this in slowly. But I think, as I said, the goal is to get to that silence point where you then actually can go on a walk without any headphones in and you can just listen to what's around you, because what that then is doing is taking you out of your brain and you're scanning for threats and bringing you back into your body, because you're being like, okay, what's happening today, rather than being all in your thoughts. It's like, okay, the reality, what's happening here, what's coming up, what can I see, what can I feel. An exercise that I really love is when you engage all five senses. So you look for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And this can take you a minute to do, but it brings you back into your body so quickly that it takes you out of those like spiraling thoughts, oh my gosh, so much is happening, to, okay, reality, let's bring me back into my body. And the silence is trying to do a similar thing to just counter all of that stimulation around you. There's an amazing thing of like, we've basically come across like on average 18 micro stressors before we've even got to our desk in the morning. And those micro stressors are things like the sound of our alarm, the sound of traffic, the commute, all of these little things build and build and build in your day. And when we talk about stress and burnout, the things that are on your body are not just the emails that you're getting. There are so many other sources of stress, and a lot of those sources we can control, and noise is one of them. The stimulation around us is one that we can control. The emails, the work that you're doing, that's the piece you can't control. But so often we're focusing on that piece and blaming that one for how we're feeling, and not looking at the other pieces around us, which are the things like, do I ever get to switch off? Do I ever actually give my brain space to process my emotions, process what I've been through, and process what I'm doing, to then come back more sort of thinking more clearly and all of those things. But it's a real, it's flip the other way. We don't ever give ourselves that break. We just stay on that hamster wheel, thinking that that's how we, and I hear a lot from people, it's like, well, if I stop, I'll never start again. It's like, well, that's actually the biggest sign that you need to stop, because if that's how you feel, trust me, I know from experience, your body will tell you that you have to stop. And at that point, you have no choice. The great thing about where you currently are is you have a choice, and it doesn't have to be in a scary way. As I said, we start slow. Start with switching to the instrumental music, to doing just one thing, and then see how much that calms you and how different you feel afterwards. And you'll start to crave that more and more. Like, you'll crave the silence. Like, I now get to a point where I'm like, I need to go on a walk without listening to anything. And that, I can't really meditate. I don't love meditating. It's not something I enjoy. Tell me that I can go on a walk and I can just listen to everything around me. Heaven. Like, that for me is the most calming practice I can do. And so you'll start craving that silence. And it really shifts like the impact on your body as well.
Wow, that is so interesting. I didn't know any of these things. Crazy. What I'm kind of hearing is multitasking might be a key factor that is leading to potential burnout. Is that right?
It can be one of them, yes. I think the thing with burnout is everyone's causes and lead up to it will always be very different. But we are not wired to multitask. Yes, we can do it, but it's not how our brain is wired. And actually, you are a lot more productive when you aren't multitasking or focusing on one thing. We want to think of stress and burnout as we all have a stress bucket. So if you think about this as everything that is stressful is filling up that bucket, whether it's work, your emails, the commute, your diet, under eating, over exercising, all of those things, chemicals in the environment, all of those are a stress on the body, and that is filling the bucket up. And the bucket, sort of, when you at the bottom, you don't really feel any symptoms, but the more full it's getting, the more symptoms you're experiencing. So whether that's, and the thing when it comes to the symptom side, that yes, that stimulation is one of them, but it's also wider than that. It's things like, how is your digestion? How is your sleep? It's not just, oh, my brain is really busy and I feel stressed. The symptoms are so much wider of, do you find yourself really bloated and puffy? Are you gaining weight and you don't really understand why because nothing's changed in terms of your diet, your exercise, all of those things? Are you really irritable? Are you snapping at everything? Can you actually find things funny, or are you just like, I'm numb to all of these things that are coming up? How is your gut health? How is your sleep? Those things are an indicator of how full that bucket is getting. And the fuller it's getting, the more symptoms are going to be coming up and the worse you're going to be feeling, to the point where then burnout's at the top because it's just got too much. So the multitasking side is, if you think about it, when you're multitasking, the number of things that you're adding to your bucket while you multitask is huge, because you're having to focus on so many different things, adding more and more to this bucket. And we can always empty the bucket with our tools, but we never do enough tools really to properly empty the bucket. And that's where we need to bring more focus into. But the multitasking there is a big one. You're asking your brain to do so many different things at once, on top of coping with the stress and everything it's under, whilst being, for the majority of us, underfueled. And that's not that we aren't eating enough from a sort of amount perspective, it's from a nutrient perspective. We are underfueled. We are not getting enough of the nutrients we want to be getting. As we've said, like, these can be such simple switches that you do to your plate to make such a big difference, that we are asking too much of our body when it is already sort of having to work against big factors that it's having to deal with every day. And then we add on that by being like, yeah, I'm going to do these, I'm going to scroll on Instagram whilst also watch TV. And we're not even just watching really lovely TV. We think about it, like, if you're watching something that's actually quite intense or stressful or action packed or upsetting, like, those emotions are still stressful on the body, but we just think of it as this innocent, oh, I'm just watching TV. But watching that is very different to watching, I mean, I was obsessed with Nobody Wants This because it was like the perfect switch off TV that you didn't actually have to focus on at all. They're two very different things, and the level of stress in your body changes as well.
That is an interesting point. I've never actually thought for 1 second that I might be causing myself more stress by multitasking, which is like my favorite thing to do, by the way.
I think, and because there's like, habit stacking is an incredible thing where you habits, like, you stack all your different habits. So like, you want to get natural light. Can you do it while you are putting your makeup on the morning, in the morning, stood by a window? That's habit stacking. And you're sort of finding an easy way to bring in new habits so that ultimately it becomes something that you stick to. There are different levels to multitasking. It's when you are, if you think about the demands on your brain, use it that way. So brushing your teeth is something you don't really have to think about. So stacking something onto that is not so bad. Yes, okay, if we're then listening to a podcast, it falls into the I have no sort of break in my day side of things. But the multitasking that's making you jump from so many different tasks and never really focusing on one is asking a lot. And I think when I said around creating space for yourself each day is a massive part of your sort of stress recovery plan. Say you want to do some cooking, but you're also like, oh, I'm going to watch TV and I'm also going to keep checking my emails and make sure it's all okay. You haven't given yourself space there. You're still doing 100 things, but could you do each one of those for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is, and just create a calmer environment? I think we know when the multitasking has gone too far because it doesn't feel calm. It feels a lot. And it's sort of tuning into that feeling as well, because there will be some things that you naturally multitask and you do together and it really works. And there'll be other things when you're like, I know that this is too much on my body at once, but I'm still going to keep doing it. Actually take a step back and see, actually, can I switch this, do it a bit differently?
I think within the legal industry, we were talking about the fact that, a lot of people blame the industry for it being a notoriously stressful industry. And as we've kind of mentioned previously, is a high accountability and therefore highly stressful sector to work in. So it's kind of the nature of the job. But do you think that a lot of lawyers blame the industry and then therefore take that blame off of themselves and aren't responsible for their own actions, which then lead to burnout?
Yes, which sounds very harsh, and not everyone, but I just say it from the perspective of it is very easy to be like, well, this is just what it's like, and there's nothing I can do about it. But a big thing for me is personal responsibility because ultimately we do want the industry to change for the better. We want it to become a place where burnout isn't as rife as it could be, and actually we can really start looking after ourselves properly. You can wait for that to happen, or you can take action now and do something for yourself to make a difference. And I think it is such a powerful way to think of it. If you're like, I'm actually going to do this for me, I know this, it's a career that you train so hard for. You go through law school, you go through the application process, you go through the trainee process. Like each one of those stages is such a huge success when you get it, but you also know how terrifying it is at the time of like how hard you've worked to get there. So why are we letting this external thing cause us something that is an internal process? Burnout is something that's happening to you. It's not happening to anyone else. So why are we letting the external completely dictate our length of time in the career, how much we enjoy it? Again, the speed at which people go into it and are like, I love this, it's the best thing, I've worked so hard for it. And then you watch people lose their love for it. And I find that really sad because it is something that at the start you were like, this is the best thing, I'm so excited, I got the job, incredible. Let's keep that up as much as possible by actually looking after ourselves and realizing that in the same way that we can't blame the external stressor, why are we blaming just the industry, and realizing that there's a lot we can do. When I said around our thoughts that create our reality, I remember when I joined White and Case, it was that like before we'd even started, we hadn't even had our first day, still at law school, and everyone was like, oh yeah, no, we'll never sleep again. Like, oh, it's going to be so stressful. We're going to have the longest hours. I'm going to be so busy all the time. I'm never going to be able to make weekday plans. And yes, sometimes that is very true. You can't do those things. But when you tell yourself that that is going to be your reality, oh my gosh, it becomes your reality. Did I ever make weekday plans? No. Could I have? Definitely. But I told myself that I couldn't do those things. And actually, a client I worked with recently, she was going from a Silver Circle firm to a US law firm. And we started working, she was like, I want to be fighting fit when I start at the US law firm. And she is such a great example of someone that took that personal responsibility and was like, I know the environment I'm going into, kind of, I don't want to fall at that hurdle of falling for all of those misconceptions and all of the sort of big statements that people say around US law firms, and that become my reality. And so she completely changed the narrative. She flipped the script and she was like, I'm going to do that job and I'll do it the same as everyone else around me, but I'm going to feel differently while doing it. And God, does she 100% do it? And she's absolutely flying because she was like, I don't need to feel that way. Yes, it's stressful, the hours are long, but I can enjoy it. I can find it fun. I can find ways to still prioritize myself by just putting myself first. And I think that's the thing. It is a career that can also take over from the hours, from the demands on you, all of those things. But when you put your boundaries up, and I don't mean boundaries say in a way of like, well, I'm just not going to do this work. No, when you put soft boundaries up of, I know what's important to me, and I know that actually I function best when I do X, or take going for a walk at lunchtime, getting outside for 10 minutes. I know I function best if I take those 10 minutes. If you draw that soft boundary, that is going to snowball and you will start feeling completely different. It will stop that feeling of like the job takes over and I have no say in this. In any situation, when we tell ourselves we don't have a say in something, you lose your power and you feel like, what's the point in doing anything? So therefore, you blame when we burn out, when we go or just feel stressed, we blame the environment. But actually taking a step back and being like, what could I have done differently in that situation to prevent this from happening? I know that when I burnt out, that was not because of the job. The people around me doing the exact same jobs, they didn't burn out, but I did because my resources weren't there. And so I can look back and be like, actually, if I'd done X, Y, Z differently, if I'd supported my body through that, I could have avoided burnout. But that came down to the personal responsibility piece, which I think is a hard pill to swallow. It's always nice to blame something external and not think that you're responsible for it. But it's also empowering because it's like, what can I do to get there? Like, I know I want to do this job. I know I've worked hard for it and I know I'm really good at it. So I want to I want to make it something sustainable. I want to make it something that I enjoy and don't lose my love for it. Because the fulfillment, like energy, half of energy is vitality. You have your physical energy and you have your vitality. And you can have all the physical energy through your food and your sleep and all of those things in the world. But if you don't have vitality, which is your purpose, fulfillment, sense of achievement, if that's not there, you're never going to feel fully energized. And a lot of that fulfillment comes from doing a good job at work, like feeling like, God, I really aced that. Like that went so well. Look at us as a team, like how incredible that was. And that comes down to really achieving great things, but you need to be supporting yourself through that. So you don't want to get rid of the work piece because then you lose the vitality, but you also can't keep blaming it for how you're feeling. Yes, it's a factor, but it's not the sole cause of what's going on.
It's super interesting to hear you talk about it, not only from your own personal experience, but from a scientific, actual standpoint as well, which is so great. And that's what I really like about you is the fact that you've been through the industry, like you were a lawyer, you know how it is, you've suffered your own burnout, you've seen your colleagues around you, you know how it goes. But
Mm,
you're also working now in such an amazing role and you've learned so much and you're so knowledgeable on this topic that the two just go really hand in hand together, which I think is so great that you can help lawyers, because a lot of lawyers don't like to listen to people who aren't or weren't lawyers because they're like, well,
mm,
what do you know? You don't understand what I do, you know?
yeah. And I think that is it is a unique environment. It's a unique industry. It's a very demanding industry. As I said, the sort of performance that you're expected to reach and what you want to do is so huge. And I think there are some quirks to it. Like, how many places can you say have sleeping pods? Very few. But in law firms, I mean, I feel like they're becoming less and less, but they definitely have always been a thing. And so it's sort of taking the reality and also realizing that, because I know when I started as a trainee, I think I said it on our first podcast together, we had a stress management talk. And everything they said, it was like, don't eat lunch at your desk, make sure you're getting 8 hours sleep. And it was like, but that's not the reality. Like, how is that possible? So we ignored, I'm sure there was so much gold in what she was saying, but we ignored all of it because it's like, well, we can't do those key things. So why am I even going to listen? And this is always about taking what the ideal is going to be. So say, okay, yeah, 8 hours sleep, fine. That might be the ideal that we read that statistic and all of those things. But actually, the focus for lawyers should be on the quality of your sleep. So no matter how many hours you're getting, is that good quality sleep? And that comes down to how you're looking after yourself, which is so possible, even if it's going to be 3 hours sleep one night. If you can make sure it's a really good quality 3 hours, that could be better than someone that gets 8 hours sleep every single night, but actually it's terrible sleep and they're not restoring at all. I mean, it's very far fetched, but it's real. Like, that is a possibility. It's knowing that these things aren't unattainable, that these things aren't completely out of control. There's always a way of tailoring it to your situation, tailoring it to your reality. And especially when you bring in the intention piece, if your intention is that you want to keep doing this and actually feel better, when you have that intention there, it'll completely catapult the results that you're feeling from the smallest things, because why and the meaning behind it has such a deeper impact on the body than if we approach our to-do list, or sorry, if we approach our tasks, like our habits, in the same way we approach our to-do list. So you have a morning routine of getting outside, going to a gym class, making breakfast, having your coffee. If you're doing that on autopilot, you're just taking it off like, yeah, done that one, done that one, done that one, like we do with the tasks we've got to do for work, it's not going to be having an impact on your body. That's what I found for myself. So back in, must have been 2020, my first sort of phase of burnout was 2021. And through that one, I ended up having to take 6 months off work. And it was then 2022, and I know maybe it was 2023. The years are all merging into one, but I basically realized that, having told myself that I was never going to go through burnout again, I was like, I know what's going to come up for me, I know my symptoms. I was heading straight back down that path again, but it was not because I wasn't trying. Like, I was doing a lot of the habits that I knew were going to help me. They'd helped me through those 6 months. They'd got me to the other side, so it was going to be fine. but they become just something I ticked off. I did them on autopilot. I wasn't really connecting to them. So they weren't having the impact. Actually, they become an extra source of stress in the day of like, I've got to fit all of this in. So it's really the sort of mindset perception piece around it is also really important of you make the decision and you know that these things are going to be the things that help you, but you have to have that intention behind it. And that why is a big piece, that your why is very individual, very personal. But for a lot of people, it's like they just want to feel like they are putting themselves first. They want to really have that belief that they can do this job and also look after their family, be there for their friends, look after their health. We can bridge the gap between these two things. It just has to be intentional. We can't just assume it's going to happen because that's when it all sort of falls away.
Do you think lawyers are or can be addicted to stress?
Yeah, I was. Fully. For me, stress, I thought I had to be stressed in order to perform well. I thought stress was the thing that gave me the results that I got. That went back to school with exams, uni with submissions. Stress had kind of become my identity. And when you adopt stress as your identity, breaking out of that is obviously quite hard. Yeah, I think we use stress as a thing of like, oh, well, actually, I need to feel like that in order to do well, and I'm never going to feel any different. As we spoke about, stress can be used as in a positive way and you can see it as a challenge. But when you tell yourself, I am stressed, you are going to stay stressed because you are literally adopting that identity. So it's breaking that down a bit and being like, actually, do I want to be known as the person that's always stressed? Surely I want to be the person that does the same task, feeling totally at ease. It just all flows. I don't have that, that frantic energy that you see in people. That's not how I want to be thought of. Like, I don't want people to look at me and go, oh God, she's so frantic. She gets so stressed about the smallest things. But when we adopt that identity piece, yes, it becomes the reality and it also becomes the thing that we're addicted to in the sense of like, oh yeah, well, it's proven before that I get through this because I have that identity. So I'm just going to keep standing by that. No, we can use stress to our advantage to get us there, but it doesn't have to be the feelings that come with it can actually be very different. And stress itself is addictive because, as I said, it's that survival side. And it is that like, well, actually, I'm functioning amazingly, so I'm just going to stay in it. And it's this addictive cycle of wanting to this like high performance constantly. But it's not about never being stressed. It's about having the down times within that because we can't just stay at that 100% all the time. Our bodies need the recovery. Using the athlete example again, think about someone training for the Olympics. The months before are so intense. They then have that whole process of going through the Olympics, all the training, all of the hard work that goes into that. Athletes know they have to prioritize their well-being in order to perform at that level, something that lawyers and I think people generally, we don't really think of. But B, they know afterwards that they are going to have their recovery plan. For us, when we think of closings, filings, whatever it is, signings, we go through those periods, but very rarely do we then go, okay, what's my recovery after that? It's like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing I'm going to do? And that's okay as long as within that time, you're also finding the time to recover. Keep looking for the next thing, keep having those goals, keep doing those things. But what are you then doing to bring your body back down into your rest and digest, your calmer state? And that gives you the longevity and starts to break the addiction cycle.
Mm. Yeah. I think also another thing is, I guess addiction comes into it for a lot of people, as you've just mentioned. But another thing is this level of approval. I've heard a lot of lawyers saying that they feel like, when you go to the kitchen, you're making a cup of tea and everyone's like, oh, how's it going? How's your day going? If someone says, oh, it's going great, I'm on top of my caseload, I've billed all the hours I need to bill this month, and I'm not stressed. Then everyone's like, who on earth do you think you are? But the norm is to be like, oh, I'm so stressed. Like, I've just got so
Yeah.
much on. And it's this approval thing. I guess it's part of like feeling like you're in this community of stress. And I think that makes people feel like, oh, I should actually be stressed?
Yeah, it's become the norm. It's become the what you're surrounded by. It's the environment, and it's become okay. Well, to fit in, ultimately, if we go back to like how many like ancient times, we are wired to fit in. We want to be a part of a community, and when you are in a law firm, that is then your community. So you want to fit in. Like we are naturally wired to do that. And so when yes, the rhetoric is well to fit in here, you have to be stressed, you adopt that mentality too. It all feeds each other because stress then becomes this status symbol. It's okay, if you're busy, that must mean you're really good at your job. That must mean that you're wanted, you're desired, people really want to work with you. But
Mm.
actually, that statement isn't a reflection of your work. That statement is a reflection of how you feel. And I think the really big distinction there is taking, okay, you're saying you're busy and you're stressed, but is that a reflection? Does that equal the output of the work that you're doing every single day and where you're at in your deal or the case that you're on, whatever it is? Or is that just like you feel that feeling, but actually the work, your hours aren't that high or something different? Can be a big disconnect between those things of, yeah, the feeling and the actual work. And I think that's where the rhetoric does need to change. And obviously, that is going to take time. And that does come from people wanting to change that rhetoric and being like, do you know what? I don't want that to be the answer to the question, how are you? I want to say something completely different. And that being okay. So, again, back to that personal responsibility, be the person that changes that. Be the person that actually goes, no, you know what? I'm actually really good today. I feel fine. I don't feel too stressed. There's the thing that then comes in is a fear around why I'm going to be looked at lesser. I can't be as good as them if I say that. But if you have the confidence in yourself to know the work that you're doing, the hours that you're billing, the things that you're achieving, if you are truly confident in those things, you will have no qualm saying that you're actually not stressed at all. The piece that comes in is like this, like, oh God, I need to prove myself. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. Actually, the only person that really matters is your boss, the partners that are looking at your numbers and the work that you're doing, the work products that you're producing for the client. Those are the things that matter. If those are all ticks, it doesn't really matter what you say in the answer to how are you, because that shouldn't be the determinant of how you feel. It's actually the feedback on your work is the more important part. So yeah, be the person that changes the narrative and actually say something. You'll say it and people will probably like sort of nod along and then turn around and be like, sorry, what did you just say? Because it takes you by surprise. It's like in any situation when we expect an answer, and if you get something different, you're like, wait, hold on a second, I think I heard that wrong. I think it's like, no, just change it. And this will take time. I think these are the pieces that will take time to really change. But yeah, you could also have fun with it and be the one that breaks the cycle. So I am a health and nutrition coach, and I work with clients to redefine what high performance means and looks like for them through both nutrition and lifestyle changes. And this is really about bridging the gap between your health and your career so that you can keep your output and your performance at that level that you really want it to be, but feel completely different while you're doing it. This is something that massively comes from my own personal journey. So I actually started my career as a solicitor. I was at White and Case for 6 years, trained and qualified there. And while I was there, I went through experiences with burnout and grief. So for 3 years of those six, which is slightly terrifying to say, I was a full-time carer to my parents. They both went through cancer diagnoses at the same time. So when I say I understand what being under a lot of pressure, what finding balance, what all of those things mean, I really do mean it. And it's now very much about taking all of those strategies and those personal experiences to the work I do now to really just transform how someone feels while they're doing the job that they love. And it completely changes how you feel and show up every single day. I'm also very fortunate to work with law firms, whether that's with employees or with the firms themselves, to bring these conversations to the companies, because I think they are just topics that need to be spoken more about and can really change the experience for people within the firm that you're working at. So I really love that piece as well. I still get my connection to a career that I really did love, and so I don't feel like I've lost any of that, which is heaven. But yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Grace Williams. I'm sure we'll be linking it, but yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me.